Last night, Blackmagic dropped a huge amount of exciting new products on us, completely replacing their studio camera lineup, their HyperDeck Studio lineup, and introducing a 4K model of the web presenter. There's a huge amount to talk about here, and although there's technically no new product categories or anything like that, these are all updates to existing products, but they're big updates, which could entirely change the way things are done for both large studios and small. But let's start with the cameras. We now have the Studio Camera 4K Plus and the Studio Camera 4K Pro. The difference is that the Pro is the full bells and whistles version, while the Plus strips out some features and focuses down on HDMI connections only, basically making it a version of these cameras specifically designed to be used with their A10 Mini lineup, which I think is a really smart move. There are, of course, a bunch of changes here from the older studio camera design, but the one that will make the biggest difference by far is the new sensor. This is a 4K Micro Four Thirds sensor, which seems to give a dramatic improvement in low light performance. Now, they didn't say specifically, but I think it's likely that this is the same sensor as the Pocket 4K Cinema camera, which is a fantastic sensor. This will make a big difference because the older studio cameras, let's be honest, were noisy. You had to use a lot of light in order to make them look good, which, considering that these are affordable studio cameras for small studios on a tight budget, was often not easy to do. This one change makes these cameras such better products, in my opinion. It's just hard for me to overstate that, really. The poor low light performance on the older ones just fundamentally clashed, I think, with the entire purpose of the cameras. But now, with low light performance like this, life will be so much easier for studios on tight budgets. I mean, don't get me wrong, no one is lighting a studio with candles, but you need a lot of space and a decent budget behind it to make soft lighting that looks good at the kind of brightness levels that the old cameras needed. I mean, now you could use just a bunch of simple soft LED panels like I'm doing right now for this video, and it should actually look good. Amazing for smaller studio productions and for education setups in unis, anything like that. I think these will be really popular cameras. It's not just all about that new sensor though. There's also a load of other nice tweaks. Some of my favorites are just a focus on portability when designing it. There's a smaller 7-inch touchscreen on the back, but with a foldable sun hood so that you can pull it in and out of a bag easily. There's a built-in tripod mount base plate with space to add rails straight into the camera. Great for adding a simple teleprompter. There are 2 XLR inputs with much better audio preamps inside, plus a 3.5mm input as well if you want to use a smaller microphone or a lav mic system like the Rode Wireless Go or something like that. The tally light on the front is huge, and the camera comes with a bunch of number decals for marking them which camera is which. Plus, the TalkBack system is now an industry standard 5-pin connector as well. Perhaps the feature I was most surprised to see though was that you can record Blackmagic RAW from the 2 USB-C ports onto any external SSD, which is just another way that small studios can quite easily up the quality of their projects. But where it gets really exciting is what happens outside of the actual camera unit itself, as Blackmagic also introduced a whole bunch of new important accessories to make them fit into small studios' workflows even better. So they now do a dedicated focus or zoom controller which connects over USB-C and controls your Micro Four Thirds lens. Now, of course, you need a power zoom lens for this, and we have a bunch listed as accessories to the camera on our product pages online, but these will make using those lenses much easier, which is important as these lenses are probably the one main weakness of the cameras now. I mean, there's definitely scope, I think, for a lens manufacturer to come along with a simple power zoom Micro Four Thirds lens with a constant aperture and a decent zoom range. And that would be a perfect pairing for these cameras. But right now, you're probably going to have to put up with a bit of ramping on the aperture if you want to use these focus or these zoom controllers, which is a shame, but I suppose with the improved low light performance, perhaps not the end of the world. There's also all the connections that you need to fit into your workflow, plus some you might not actually expect. There's the HDMI output, of course, and on the Plus model, that is pretty much the only choice. But on the Pro, there's a 12G SDI output for up to 4K 60p back to your switcher, plus audio and talkback just off of that same cable. And the 12G SDI back in means that you can put a return program feed onto the screen of the camera as well, which is a really nice touch. There's then a 10G Ethernet port, which is the big surprise one. Now this isn't for direct streaming or for NDI, unfortunately. That would have been really nice to have in a camera like this. But instead, this is to use with Blackmagic's new Studio Converter box, which lets you use an Ethernet cable as a point-to-point connection to send your video and audio in full uncompressed quality, plus TalkBack and PoE++ to actually power the camera. So the idea is that this replicates a true studio SMPTE fiber workflow, but just over a simple copper Cat6 Ethernet cable, which is dramatically lower cost. Everything about these new studio cameras is designed to take that original concept that they developed with the original cameras and just make it so much more practical to use in a small studio environment with a limited budget. I think they've done a great job. But that's certainly not everything that Blackmagic had up their sleeve last night. They also completely refreshed the HyperDeck Studio range of broadcast recorders, adding timecode and syncing support across the board, which was a hugely requested feature. The older HyperDeck Studios were still one of the best ways to record on larger studio productions, despite their age, and these new ones make pretty much everything better. The timecode support is just the start. There's also new codecs like H.265 and ProRes 444 support on the 4K Pro, complete with key and fill alpha channels as well for graphics. There's USB-C ports so that you can record to external hard drives, along with both SSD slots and SD card slots on the larger Pro models. And those Pro ones also have a 10G network port for pulling files off those drives over FTP servers. Imagine remotely accessing those files pretty much anywhere in the world as they're being recorded, all without anyone having to actually physically move any hard drives around on set. So the recording side is hugely improved, but the playback side is just as important with HyperDecks. And you now get a much more comprehensive suite of playback controls, as well as a true metal search dial with a clutch that kicks in to stop it once you hit the end of a clip, just like on an old traditional broadcast deck. Looks like it'd be really nice and easy to use. There's also much better audio monitoring, which is another very highly requested feature from our customers. You now get a headphone socket on all but the smallest model and a built-in speaker, which you can activate with a push button to quickly check audio is being recorded. I think this new HyperDeck range could quickly become a standard recording and playback solution for all kinds of different studios. On the other end of the spectrum though is their Web Presenter 4K. This little encoder can now handle up to 4K 60p. This has come on a long way from the simple web presenter which was first announced a few years ago. That was basically just a small little box that converts down to a 720p signal connected to a computer so that it could see it as a webcam. Now this new model can still do that, even up to 4K resolutions now, which is really impressive. But it also does a whole load more. You can connect to a display to use it as a streaming status panel. You have both DC and AC inputs so that you can have a battery connected as a redundant power supply. Plus you can connect directly to the internet and stream directly with no computer needed in full 4K resolution, remember. There's an Ethernet port on the back, which you're definitely going to want to be using if you're doing 4K streaming. But you can also connect to a phone over USB-C to use its 4G or 5G connection to stream from anywhere. It's a really powerful little box, and if you want to do 4K streaming without spending a large amount of money, this is what you're going to be wanting to be taking a look at. So that's a quick rundown of pretty much everything that Blackmagic announced last night. For more information or to buy any of it, head over to proav.co.uk, as pretty much everything is available straight away now from Blackmagic, apart from the new zoom and focus controllers and that little studio box for Ethernet support on the cameras. That's going to come in October. But for now, let me know what you think of the new studio cameras, the new HyperDeck range, and the Web Presenter 4K in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.